Are we ready? Mr. Dua? Good morning. And welcome, my board members, board staff, our audience members here in the room and online. Has everyone who wishes to be logged on now on? There's a thumbs up with the technical folks in the back. Thank you for that. My name is Jane Dolan. I'm the president of the board. And I now determine people who are to be online and been admitted. And please know that our meeting is recorded. All of our meetings are recorded. So I'm going to begin with calling the Central Valley Flood Protection Board meeting of Friday, February 23rd, 2024. I have to look, make sure I don't say another year, to order. So first up, we will determine quorum by a roll call. Is that you, Mr. EO, or you, Mr. Clerk? Mr. Knapp, if you would call the roll, please.
Member Bosler,
Here.
Secretary Johnson,
I'm here. Good morning, everyone.
Member Countryman,
Present.
Member Griego,
Here.
Vice President Valines is absent. President Dolan.
I'm here. So we do have a quorum. We have 5 members present. 1 is absent, and we have 1 vacancy. So we will now proceed. Do we have any announcements, Mr. Executive Officer?
I have no announcements.
No announcements, no announcements, no introductions. Then we will proceed. I will provide at this point a brief review of the agenda. Once I give that review, we'll move to approval of minutes of a meeting. Item 5 is what's called the consent items time. We have 3 items for those that have been pre-briefed and analyzed and considered routine. Item 6 is a spot that's called public comments. That's where we welcome brief comments to the board on an item of interest to someone that is related to what we do, related to our jurisdiction and authority, but is not on the agenda today. Item 7, we will note receipt of a written submittal of a legislative update by our executive officer. Item 8 is composed of 2 there's 2 items. One is an informational presentation of a levee inspection by the Army Corps of Engineers. Item 9 is comprised of 2 items of DWR. One is to note receipt of the informational monthly report, which we appreciate. And the other is information and update on the progress of multi-benefit projects that are underway. Item 10 is identified as board items. There are 2 matters: a permit with a proposed recommendation for action and a presentation of the draft of the feasibility study of the Sacramento San Joaquin Drainage District. Item 11 is report submitted by our staff. And item 12 is for board comments on any committees or activities or interests that they wish to share. Item 13, you all can read it. It's a list of upcoming meetings and their locations, but I think we found one for the one that says location to be determined. There will be no closed session, and then we will adjourn. It seems to me that some of these items are going to go quickly, but now that I've said that, they may not. But in any case, I want you all to know, I think the board's aware of this. When I think it's appropriate or necessary to take a break, I will do that. And we try to keep those brief breaks. We do not anticipate taking a lengthy lunch break. Any addition to what I just said? So the agenda is in order, so let's proceed. Our first item of action is approval of minutes. So I'll ask our secretary, Board Member Brian Johnson, to present this item.
So this is the November
17.
17 to 2023 board meeting minutes, and I've reviewed them. I believe they're in order, and I move that they be approved.
Okay. Motion is before us. Is there a second?
I'll second it.
A second by Member Griego. Any other comments on these minutes of November 17th of last year? Please call the roll.
Member Bosler,
Here, sorry. Aye. One of the two.
Yeah.
Good morning.
Morning.
Member Countryman,
Yes.
Member Griego,
Yes.
Secretary Johnson,
Aye.
Vice President Vellines is absent, President Dolan.
Yes. The minutes have been approved by a unanimous vote of those who are here. Thank you for that. Item number 5 is consent items. There are 3 items for which we are asked to adopt resolutions. The first is resolution number 2024-02, new boundary and levy units for Reclamation District 537. The second is resolution 2024-03, new boundary and levy units for Reclamation District 900. And item C, the third one is resolution 2024-04, new boundary and levy units of Reclamation District 551. Is there anyone who wishes to remove one or more of these for discussion? Or can we proceed to a vote? I see no hands here. Any hands raised? No. Okay. Is there a motion to approve the consent agenda?
I'll make a motion.
Motion by member Griego. Is there a second?
Second.
Second by member Johnson. We got a duo today. Thank you. Please call the roll.
Member Bosler,
Aye.
Member Countryman,
Yes.
Member Griego,
Yes.
Secretary Johnson,
Aye.
Vice President Vellines is absent, President Dolan.
Yes. The consent items are approved. That's a unanimous vote for those who are here and able to vote. Okay. Moving right along. Item number 6, non-agenda items, public comment. Do we have anyone who wishes to make a public comment at this point to the board? Aha. Melinda Terry, thank you for the tag. I saw this but didn't see you come in. Good morning.
Help this on.
There. Good morning. I'm Melinda Terry, Executive Director of the Central Valley Flood Control Association, and here to talk about 2 items today. One is about the report I have in my hand. I lost my sticky note along the way, but so this was a December report that was released by DWR. It's required in the Delta Levy Investment Strategy. It's supposed to be an annual report, but this one is a 4-year report. So it's kind of nice, but even better than an annual report because you have a lot of data in it. But if you haven't seen it, I really want to point it out to you because it is obviously focused on Delta levies. And so, for instance, subventions program that you approve each year is discussed in here, and the projects that were approved under that. But it goes beyond that because the report requires DWR to talk about any state funding, and they have a lot of different grant programs. Urban areas, for instance, get it from a different place than subventions. So it's a really good report, and obviously some of your project levies are talked about and what's been done on them. And towards the end, that's what I want to point out to you is you'd be surprised of the information because it'll tell you, how much the total cost of the project was, how much was requested from which funding program. And then if you go a few pages later, it'll really give a good description of the exact location where some of these projects were and a pretty in-depth for, this kind of document of what was actually done for that funding. So just really, really good document that I want to point out. The other thing.
What is the title of the document?
Thank you for the record. It is the annual report to the Delta Stewardship Council, investments in Delta levies, fiscal years 2019 through 2023.
Thank you.
So yes, encourage you, and it is on the website at the Delta Stewardship Council. If you go to the top of the tab for their plan and look under Delta Levy Investment Strategy, that's where you can find it. The second thing is, if you didn't read about it, the Contra Costa Water District reached another settlement agreement with the Department of Water Resources in 2023 over the Delta Conveyance Project. And I bring it up for your attention because for a couple of reasons, but one is in that agreement, is a couple things. The primary thing that Contra Costa gets out of it is a new alternative intake water source for a fresher source of water. But also what's in that is a lot of language prohibiting the department from stockpiling on their properties or parking there and things like that, or have to give them notice when they're going to be in that area so that they can get their work done too. And that's the kind of language that I think would ultimately be really important for a lot of these reclamation districts who, if you look at a report like this and you see the pages and pages, this is just the delta. This isn't even the rest of your system. This is just the delta of all the projects that are going on. But I also bring it up for your attention in case you're thinking about the sorts of things, even for the properties that you have that may be along this alignment that is occurring. And to also let you know, once the EIR was finalized, DWR was approached, I think, by some of the Sac Valley water districts about doing a tolling agreement so that they could try to reach a settlement. And the North Delta Water Agency, we were able to get a tolling agreement as well. So there are ongoing efforts, but if you are not trying to get some kind of settlement and agreement on what can and cannot, occur, I encourage you to have those conversations. Thank you.
Thank you for that information. You made it right at 3 minutes. Brenda Guston. We have welcomed you before, and I always ask, did I say the last name appropriately?
Guston.
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 Good morning.
Yeah. Good morning. Thank you for allowing me to be here again. I'm becoming a regular, it seems. Thank you so much for your work. I'm here to comment as a volunteer of Preserve the American River regarding the American Rivers Common Feature Project. As our local non-federal agency who will review this project, we implore you to help the residents of this city understand and work with you and the Corps by one, taking the time to review the copious number of public comments and reports submitted thus far. Extend beyond tonight or reopen the public comment period. Hold an on-site meeting to discuss this proposal with attendance by the professionals who will implement this project to answer questions. Hold a workshop after the on-site meeting and then a public hearing for testimony to be recorded on the public record. This proposal by the Corps now covers 73 acres of riparian tree canopy and appears to project the destruction of significant aspects of the ecological diversity living along and in the river, which is irreplaceable. The American River Wildlife Corridor extends 23 miles along this federal and state designated wild and scenic river, covering 5,000 acres. Mitigation measures have not been fully established to satisfy the needs this project will produce. Documentation, such as the recent study by biologist K. Sean Smallwood of the Casas property upstream and the American River, provides detailed information on the need to protect and preserve this unique habitat. In fact, the Casas property is the Central Valley Flood Protection Board's designated floodway and can be utilized to mitigate loss of habitat and support higher flows in the river. This might help the Corps implement their Engineering with Nature program and disperse high flows into the floodway. Please slow this project down. Expediency doesn't make for a better project. While it is imperative to protect our city from future flood incidents, our evaluation of the project proposal reveals excessive measures are planned to address potential stream bank erosion. Documentation presented does not provide adequate justification for these highly destructive actions as necessary for, or would even actually improve flood safety along this section of the American River. The public has not been sufficiently informed nor acknowledged as a well-informed local source of information and expertise acquired over decades of observation. The Corps stated in your last workshop their goal to communicate as soon as possible. To date, that has been us asking questions without specific answers. Our desire is to help the Army Corps accomplish their goal to communicate. We are committed to collaborating and improving our abilities to do so through reports, emails, and public comments being submitted daily. Please facilitate a partnership wherein the Corps provides a clear proposal with specific information to evaluate whether more suitable efforts are appropriate. Right now, it is not even clear which trees will be removed or will stay. This basic information needs to be provided. Please visit the American River Trees website for the research, information, and better ways to accomplish erosion and flood protection through nature-based solutions.
Ms. Gudson.
and I'm
you wrap
done.
up.
And I urge you, thank you, to work with the Bank Protection Group for more further. Thank you.
Thank you for that. Mr. Spalding?
Thank you, President
Good
Dolan.
morning.
Good morning. Good to see you again. I feel like I'm becoming a regular too. Once more, I'd like to talk a
You
bit
are.
about the upcoming American River Common Features Project erosion control projects, especially Contract 3B. I did have a whole nother set of comments I was going to share with you today, but after watching KCRA Channel 3's news coverage of this project last night, I really needed to change it. The reporter totally missed the point that my friend and my neighbor and colleague Bill Avery was trying to make. The reporter turned the concerns we have been raising about this contract into an either-or outcome. This is not the case. The concerns we are raising, lack of soil data, need for more soil boring analysis or samples, running new hydrology models, accounting for slurry wall strengthening and the Folsom Dam Raise project, which is expected to reduce the 200-year flood protection flows substantially, engineering with nature, and the loss of spawning habitat, riverfront access, beaches, and social trails are really meant to say, slow down. There's no emergency. Our levees are not crumbling before our eyes. Get more borings, run the new models, engineer with nature, not against her, and design a more targeted, data-driven, evidence-based project for the Contract 3B area. Yes, we can have flood protection and erosion control and a vibrant, wild, and scenic American river without destroying acres of vegetation and hundreds of trees. 2 weeks ago, Colonel Chadwell was here speaking about partnerships. His very last slide discussed effective engagement and advocacy. Do you remember the top bullet on that slide?
Mhm.
I have it here. Communicate, communicate, communicate as soon as possible. Well, up till now, the communication with the public on this project has been abysmal. Since the beginning of January, we've been reaching out to residents in the Glenbrook, Larchmont, Sierra Oaks, and Wilhagen areas. We've talked with hundreds of residents. Many were shocked, and few were aware of the project or recalled receiving any notice. This is the notice that I received right around Thanksgiving before the holiday period about the project and the availability of the environmental reports. Partly because of the lack of communication, the Corps and Department of Water Resources will be receiving hundreds of comments justifying why the supplemental reports for Contract 3B should not be approved. Before you vote, I hope you will conduct a public workshop and a public hearing. Please consider removing Contract 3B from any approvals. Let's take the time to do it right. Only you can convince the Army Corps that we can have flood protection, erosion control, and a wild and scenic American River Parkway for generations to come. Thank you. Now I have to go finish my comments. They're due by 5 o'clock today.
They are, so please do that. Thank you. I see no other cards of folks wishing to speak, so I just want to ask if there is anyone. I see no one raising their hand or stepping up in the room. Anyone online? Okay. I'm going to take this time to say something about this. It is not to engage and it's not to invite anyone else to the podium. It's just merely a statement on this. The board and board staff acknowledges that there have been numerous comments that have been submitted and they are being considered with great consideration. The supplemental environmental impact statement and the supplemental EIR for this project received all these comments and they will be addressed. They are not addressed as they are received. And the comment period, which has been long established, does end at the end of today, February 23rd. But all comments, as I said, will receive a response. The staff of the Army Corps of Engineers and the staff of the Central Valley Flood Protection Board are working on that. They're not just put in some folder. They are addressed. They become part of the document that is submitted for the environmental to review. Certification of the final document is subject to approval of this board. The timing of that is unknown at this point, but it's not going to be next week. The final document, as it is promulgated and written with all of the comments being addressed by the Corps and the board staff, will be available to the public for a time period before there is a hearing before this board. We note what we have heard is that the Army Corps of Engineers is looking to refine the project designs. They're not ready to say what they are, but they are under investigation. And those will be provided to the board and to the public, and also to the Department of Water Resources. So it isn't like we're just blankly listening to you all. This is an important public process, and it will continue to be public. And that's all for that. Thank you for allowing me to say that. Item number 7, legislative update. We've received a written report, state legislation such that it is, and federal news such that it is. We're going to get a continuing resolution so that the federal government can operate.
That's not in my purview,
Oh, it's
but
not? You said we're waiting for it.
We're waiting for it.
Okay.
One note, the rulemaking for the principles, requirements, and guidelines that was referenced has been promulgated. The comment period ends April 15th.
Are we going to do a workshop on that? You can just tell me you'll think about it.
Sorry, Chris, can you repeat when the comment period ends?
Tax day, April 15th.
And we were aware that this was coming. I think that we saw it. It might have been at the last meeting, or it just could have been conversations that were occurring. Our staff is carefully looking at that and developing answers to that. And we also have been in contact with the Department of Water Resources to do a joint response to that. So a lot of work there, technical stuff, about time something like that got promulgated. I'm sure it won't go quickly. Complicated effort. Okay. Anything else you wanted to highlight from your report? Any comments from the board on the report? Audience? Thank you for putting that together for each meeting.
I was just, when I was reading the report, I was just reflecting, you know, this is a source of a lot of frustration by a lot of people, that these rules from the federal government that are sometimes were developed many decades ago and don't have a lot of flexibility. And so this is a really special opportunity. And I am reflecting on how much the FEMA program has changed post Katrina. And so I guess I really want people to do the work right now to give them really constructive feedback about how things work on the ground, because the federal government has a track record of actually changing things for the better. And that's, I think, really evident in the FEMA. Well, I mean, these things have been in place for a long time. And so there's a lot of inertia that is very comfortable in the way things have been done, but times have changed. We need more nimble efforts. And I think that there is, I have seen the FEMA rules change post-Katrina around recovery and around how to make that more flexible and more tailored to local needs. And I think that that's really, really something to kind of hold out as we can get there. So, but it's really important that people speak up and people put together coherent feedback so that they can take that in.
Thank you for highlighting that and supporting that. Yes, some of these policies and regulations and rules were promulgated and have been in effect since 1955. So I'm not going to ask those of you who were born after that to raise your hand, but a few of us were young enough not to have paid attention. So it is time to change. It's just so much more information that we have in the decade. So it's about time. Some have been updated, but this is a big movement forward. So we'll take our time to give appropriate input for California and the Central Valley. Any other comments? Okay, we'll move on. Next, item number 8, United States Army Corps of Engineers for a levee system report. And I'm going to ask Enforcement Section staff, Mr. Zubair Dosu, to introduce the item. Good morning.
Good morning, President Dolan, members of the board. My name is Zubair Dosu. I'm a water resource engineer for the board's enforcement section. Today, I'm here to introduce Emily Green from the Corps' inspection section to give a presentation on the Honka Creek Area Eastern Levee System. And she'll give that on the inspection results. And after her presentation, I will be available to answer any questions you may have and present on board staff's analysis. So please welcome Emily.
Good
Hi.
morning.
Good morning, President Dolan and members of the board. Happy to be here today to share the results of our most recent inspection and be engaged in this conversation. So I'll get started. Next slide, please.
You're going to show us where it is.
One more slide.
I actually know.
Thank you. Okay, so again, we're here talking about the Honka Creek Area Eastern Levee System. This system is part of the Sacramento River Flood Control Project. It's a 1.5 mile single segment system located in Yuba County, about 10 miles north of the city of Marysville. And it reduces flood risk to the adjacent agricultural lands to the south. Next slide. All right, so here's a snapshot of the inspection report card. So the highest rating received was unacceptable, which we define as an unacceptable condition that is expected to have a negative impact on project performance. Categories where unacceptable conditions were observed include encroachments, erosion bank caving, animal control, and settlement. So based on the results of this inspection, the system will remain inactive in the PL 8499 rehabilitation program. So you may notice that there are no colors on this report card. Historically, you have seen shades of red and yellow with the purpose of communicating severity of an issue and representing different levels of risk. We're transitioning to a new inspection tool that unfortunately does not allow the use of colors anymore. So you won't see colors. However, how we are evaluating unacceptable items is not changing. Instead of colors, we're going to be using text words in the inspection report to identify those higher risk items. Next slide. All right, so here we have a few example observations from the inspection report. All of these items were assigned an unacceptable rating and are expected to have a negative impact on project performance. In other words, these are all what we would have formally identified as unacceptable red, what we determined to be the highest risk of the system based on our visual inspection. So starting with photo number 1, we're looking at a 24-inch diameter metal drainage pipe through the levee. There was limited information on this pipe. There was no permit found. A video inspection had not been performed, so the internal condition of this pipe is unknown. There was also no flap gate observed on the water side, which is what is shown in this photo. Picture number 2. So this is related to settlement of the levee embankment. We evaluate settlement in a couple different ways. Ideally, a comparison has been made between the latest survey data and the levee crown as-built elevations. We also perform a visual inspection in the field looking for any observable depressions of the levee crown. So I'll talk through this image here, this graph that we're looking at. So this graph compares survey the latest survey data against the as-built elevations. So the bottom line, that red line there, is the adopted floodplain, the design water surface elevation. That green line there on the top is that adopted floodplain plus 3 feet of freeboard, as is required by the O&M manual. And then that blue line there is the survey data. So what this is showing us is the full length of the segment does not have the required freeboard. And about 30% of the segment is below the adopted floodplain. So, yeah, question?
Member Countryman?
You know, did the Corps not have a wrong datum or something? Because this can't possibly be settlement. You're talking that there's not anywhere close to 3 foot of freeboard on this. And it looks like there may have been a construction error when it was built, because that can't be settlement. There's no way.
Well, the green line shown there is what the as-built identify as the elevation that it was constructed to. It's certainly something to look into. This is the results of the data that we have. I think it should be explored to figure out, what's going on.
Did the Corps look at what the datums were? Was there a datum conversion problem here or something? Because
I don't believe so.
this just doesn't seem possible.
I believe the datums are correct.
Do you have more, Mr. Countryman?
Well, I mean, I, as an engineer, I could tell you that is not because of settlement or something. You can't have general, more than 3 feet of settlement going on not a very tall levee. There's something in the surveying or something that isn't right. But
Something to look into. I mean, this is what the data is showing us, so.
Okay, well, you've made a point and responses will be looked into. My input here is that this is a pretty old levee that the farmers and landowners there pay attention to whenever they feel it needs to be done, because there's no local maintaining agency assigned and there's no levee district. It also protects agricultural land that knows the owners and the operators know it floods and they don't complain, or duck clubs that want the water. So I'm just wondering why this is even in the system, frankly.
Well, it is part of the
But it
federal
is.
system. It is, right.
It is. At some point, someone thought Hancock was going to be a city. And that would have been my estimation by 1880s. And then it did not occur. It's very rural agriculture, and it's definitely a recreational duck club area. You might be aware that I've been there with my duck club hunting cousins. Thank you. Do you have more?
Yes, I
Oh,
got a
good.
couple more example photos I'll talk through. So photo number 3, this is erosion that was observed on the lower half of the landside slope, adjacent to a weir that's tied into the levee. That water you see in the background there is associated with an irrigation ditch that runs along the levee toe. The embankment was observed to have been reduced about 4 feet at this location. Photo number 4, it is similarly also looking at erosion. This was observed at the landside toe behind a head wall associated with a pipe that's crossing through the levee. The levee embankment was observed to have been reduced by about 3 feet here. That concludes my slides. So I'm happy to answer any more questions, or I'll pass it back to Zubair for his portion of the presentation.
Godspeed over here. Thank you for that. Any more questions from the board?
I do, through the chair.
Member Grego?
So the neighboring folks that live around this section of levee are tasked with responsibility of it. Is that in lieu of assessment, or is there also an assessment?
There's currently no assessment for this levee portion. And so that is why there is no maintainer, and the only maintainer there is are the adjacent landowners, and
Right.
they habitually have maintained that levee. There are also, the levee was previously maintained by the Reclamation District 10, the neighboring district. However, when the crossing, Union Pacific train crossing, was removed, they lost their ability to access that portion of the levee. So they no longer maintain that portion of the levee system, but it's not in their obligation to. There's no assurance agreement that speaks to that need for their operation and maintenance. So that is something that is left outstanding.
Yeah, that was my next question was why wasn't District 10, watching or taking care of this levy? You just answered that.
There's,
And I guess I concur with what's been said is why is this levy under the federal system? Why hasn't it been detached?
right. So it's important to remember through the Corps' risk assessment that this levee was rated as low, and the low is defined as a low likelihood of inundation due to the breach and or system component malfunction in combination with loss of life, economic, and environmental consequences. So this is a rural levee. It's a rather small levee, and it doesn't have much need for flood protection in this area.
Correct. Thank you.
And so if we could enlarge the slides, I would go ahead and speak to the board staff's analysis on this
The
inspection. On
board, the board staff is using colors.
Yes, we still are using colors. You are correct, President Dolan. So when looking at this inspection results table, this is a comparison from the Corps' inspection from the 2013 inspection to the 2022 inspection. What can be noted is that this levee segment did improve in areas concerning operations and maintenance manual, as well as, oh, I see this is an old slide. So it did not actually improve in vegetation growth, but it did improve in sod cover, depression and rutting, and as well as in seepage. Seepage is not highlighted green, but it did improve in that category. Sorry for the confusion there. One thing to note is that this levy segment did not improve in any categories affecting PL 8499 eligibility. It's not a PL 8499 eligible levy system. It does not have a maintainer, as President Dolan expressed earlier. However, it is maintained by the local landowners, and there are only a few landowners along this levee stretch.
Madam President.
Member Countryman.
I'm sorry to be stuck on this profile issue. But it's beyond my comprehension. Did the state provide the Corps that survey of the top of levees and the water survey? Did the Corps do that survey or did the state do it? How did that?
So I do not have much background on the survey for that. That is something I believe the Corps did the survey for. Emily may know that.
I never heard of the Corps doing a survey like that.
Yes, so this survey the comparison between the survey and the as-built was actually done in 2013 during the periodic inspection. It's using data that was collected in 2007. Around that time, there was a big effort within our district to survey all of the levees. And so all of the levees have survey data around 2007 or newer as available. So this information, the same exact graph actually was included in the periodic inspection in 2013.
Excuse me. So the Corps actually went out and did the survey. Is that correct?
I believe it was the Corps or,
I never heard of
Okay.
that. That's why I'm asking.
okay, yeah. Yeah, so the Corps contracted that out back in 2007.
Oh, thank you.
That was when the levee safety program really started getting rolling. So I would assume it's related to that effort.
Through the chair, I have one more question.
Member Grego.
So going back to the neighborhood, kind of taking care of this levy here, is there a formalized agreement or there's just like a verbal agreement between neighbors that we're gonna take care of this?
There is no formal agreement. As I spoke to earlier, there's no assurance agreement in place for this portion of the levee, but keep in mind, this is a levee that's on the order of 1.5 miles. It's a very small portion of the
Yeah.
levee. So yeah, it's just the responsibility of the local landowners that live next to that levee.
And the reason I asked that question is because if the landowners change,
Huh.
is that part of the deal? Hey, you're gonna buy this piece of property, well, you're gonna help maintain it with the rest of us. I mean, that's why I asked if there was any agreement between the neighbors.
Well, this would be one of the segments we would hope gets deactivated in the future.
Yeah.
So I think those ideas should be explored.
Yeah.
I agree.
I think we all agree with that.
It's not good to have a levee that is not maintained. So
Right.
thankfully, we do have good landowners for this levee segment, and it did improve in areas as it show for their efforts.
Thank you.
There's a reason it's not maintained, and I'm just gonna be so bold as to submit that putting, water on a duck club land is probably an economic benefit.
Yes, it is.
And another
It
good
restores
reason
the
for this to
floodplain.
be, good luck you all, we're glad that it's a floodway.
Mhm.
And we spend our time on areas where, people and structures are actually in danger.
Exactly.
I'm hoping not to prolong this other than my blabber. Okay. You're right, Mr. Countryman. It probably was actually formed in the 1920s. We're done. We're done. We're done. We're done. I'm telling myself we're done. Anyone brave enough to get up after I said that? Appreciate the presentation today. Like the
Thank you,
pictures.
everyone.
It's kind of saying what needs to be done in the future. Thank you very much.
What is the process to move us to a different place? Like, is that a legal process that we initiate? Like,
It's something that comes here where we vote on it. So
but
it's
who's doing the work is my question.
probably people who are very involved with things that are far more important.
Oh, got it.
Yeah, it requires congressional action to have that segment deauthorized, so we could,
Oh, Mr. Dewar, you're gonna talk to a Congress member?
I am not. So it sounds like you have.
But
some-
it is something that like we could gather several of these things and put it in
Yes.
Yeah,
a cleanup.
or word it, yes, we could try to get it into word somehow.
It happens. Just have to pay attention. Okay. Congressional approval. Huh. Interesting. Congressional approval. Got that. All right, we're gonna proceed now with item number 9. Department of Water Resources. The first thing that I will note is that we have received the monthly report that the Department of Water Resources prepares for us to have for information on an ongoing basis, and we appreciate that. Item B is an update on multi-benefit flood projects progress. Mr. Steve Rother, manager of the Division of Multi-Benefit Initiatives, unless that name has changed, will present this item. So good morning.
Good morning. Thank you, President Dolan and board. Appreciate the opportunity to update you on progress on a number of multi-benefit projects. Lots been happening since we last talked about these projects together. So let's see. Okay, so just going to run through 5 of the projects that we're currently working on. And so the Levels project, Lower Elkhorn Basin Levee Setback Project, I believe most, if not all of you have visited this project over the years multiple times. What you're looking at there is the 7-mile long levee, the setback levee at the corner where it bends into and connects with the Sacramento bypass and Sacramento Weir. The setback levee is complete. We're in the process of degrading, almost completely done with it. Last summer, the old levee that separated, that ran along the Tule Canal, that you can see the vegetation associated with it there. And the Sacramento bypass levee is also set back and completed. And it's working as designed, and you can see there's some water on the new floodplain there. And I've got a video that may or may not work that we'll try in just in a minute, but I just wanted to show 2 more projects. This is again, between Tule Canal, you can see the strip of vegetation and the new levee there on the right. And then the overhead shot is of the new drainage pumping facility that pumps out of the lower basin and into the Sacramento bypass. So now if we can go back to this, Chavez, can you give it a try? And so hopefully what we'll see is just about a minute of drone video footage from earlier in February that shows the floodplain being inundated. And at this, I think in this clip, at this time, the water was not coming over the Fremont Weir, but actually down from the Knights Landing Ridge Cut and through Wallace Weir. But since then, Fremont Weir has spilled. I think it might still be spilling now. And so there's quite a lot of water in the system. And if it's not going to work, Chavez, we can just skip it and move on. We get the, oh, there it goes. Yeah. So that's looking south.
And music.
And music too, yes. Gotta have music. So this is up towards the top of the setback levee where it rejoins the existing levee near the Highway 5 crossing. And that's Highway 5. Okay, thank you. So we can move on then.
So good to have a drone be able to take that video because it would be arduous to go out there on foot.
Right, or a boat, yeah. So let's see. Just
Look
waiting
out.
to get the slides back up. Okay, so that was levels. Try to advance. Okay. Okay, so Lookout Slough project, another multi-benefit project that has seen a lot of activity over the last year. The bypass, the Yola bypass setback levee is completed. Most of the upgrades to the Cache Slough levee are complete. The interior channels are mostly complete. PG Tower access roads are complete. And then you can see on the right, the margin on the right and down below, the interior channels meeting the levees. The interior channels are largely constructed, but the breaches have not been created yet, and those will happen this August, starting August 17th and run through the beginning of September. And maybe we'll have a trip out there to take a look at some of the breaching if folks are interested.
Oh, let's plan on it.
Okay.
We were there for the groundbreaking and
Yeah.
other aspects.
That's
Yeah.
right. And so speaking of the groundbreaking, you'll the corner there of the new levee where it bends 90 degrees to the left is the general location of where we had the groundbreaking, and now you can see the levee there that filled up the prism that was created with the flagging that you might remember at the groundbreaking. And then the other shot is of the interior channels that have been constructed, and now the whole site is green with new vegetation and quite nice looking. So excited to see that flood up in the fall. The Little Egbert Tract project, located at the very bottom of the Yola bypass there next to Rio Vista, started the CEQA process in June of 2023. We will expect to have a draft EIR by the end of 24 and a final by sometime in the middle of 25, and hopefully construction will start in 27, and if not, then in 28. And we're looking at 4 different alternatives that all look generally like this with some details changed, and will provide flood protection, habitat, ag sustainability, as well as recreation. So really excited about this project and moving it forward. So the Upper Yolo Bypass planning process is an effort on the part of DWR and SAFEGA and in collaboration with Flood Board members to do outreach to develop and understand the local interests and priorities for a project. So last summer we entered into contract with SAFEGA, who's managing the project, and collecting the information through numerous meetings with the public and local interests. And we're looking at two types of alternatives with different alignments of each. The first type is a setback levee. You can see the dashed line down the middle of the the Yolo bypass. In this alternative, that levee would be set back to some degree into going to the right, to the east, into the Upper Elkhorn Basin there, RD 1600. And the secondary bypass would put a larger levee at the bottom of the bypass, and the entire basin would, or most of the entire basin would flood under higher flows. And under both types of alternatives that we're looking at, the Fremont Weir would be extended and lowered from where you see the green Fremont Weir line meeting the north-south Yola Bypass Weir, and it would be lowered to the east, to the north, and to the east to some degree, and we're looking at different levels. But under any circumstances, or any alternative, the that portion of the weir would not overtop as often as the existing Fremont Weir. It would be a much less frequent basis, something on the order of 10 to 15 years is what we're looking at. And so this work and the local priorities and preferences will be synthesized and provided to the core process of the comprehensive study, and in an effort to try to move the core in the direction that the local interests and state and regional interests would prefer. And the Army Corps of Engineers has indicated that they will be starting public outreach for their comprehensive study in coming months. So that process is starting to gear up, and we're preparing to engage with them actively. So Paradise Cut bypass expansion and channel restoration project, I didn't have space to fit all of that on there, is something else I wanted to provide a quick update on. You can see in this location map, it's between Tracy and Lathrop, and it would include creating a new weir upstream towards the bottom of that map figure there, and expanding the bypass into the yellow area by, I think it's more than 1,500 acres. And importantly, the local interests, RDs and landowners there are interested in including some channel dredging work as part of this project. That you can see the yellow channels to the left of the green blob. Those are the areas of existing channels that they would like to see dredged for water supply reliability, water quality, and perhaps even flood risk reduction, as the expanded Yola bypass Yola bypass would be sending more water in that direction in a high flow event. So this figure here shows the location and modeled estimates of how much the project would lower water surface elevations. The figure in the bottom right-hand corner, that dip, the plunging dip there, shows the decrease in water elevation at different points in the river. And at the lowest point, it's about a -3 feet effect of the project near and just downstream of the new Paradise Cut Weir location. So it would result in substantial flood risk reduction over a good number of river miles, and benefit Manteca and Lathrop and Tracy and even further downstream. And so the $3 million grant, SJAFCA is managing to complete a feasibility study by the end of 25. And we've got additional funding for the next phase, and they're just ramping up the technical team they hope to hire by March, and the advisory council made up of local landowners, RDs, and others has formed, and they'll play an important role as the project is developed and moves forward. And that's all. So thank you, and happy to answer any questions if you have any.
I have a question.
Yes,
It's Jane Dolan.
of course.
Say that for the transcriber. And then I'll ask the board. The elements that you talked about for Paradise Cut, are those under evaluation or
Sorry, Paradise Cut?
Paradise Cut, or have any of them been implemented?
It's still under evaluation.
Okay.
Yeah,
That's
under
what I-
study. So
that's what I
we're
thought.
preparing the feasibility study now, and then that will then transition into a CEQA process where the most promising alternatives will be studied in more depth.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah.
Board members? Questions?
I don't have any particular questions now. I want to go back and review it, but I want to thank you for that. It's impressive work and appreciate the update. And would encourage you to keep them coming. And also, I guess the question that I do have is there something that we can do to help with any of these right now? And if not, keep it in mind for next steps, individual meetings or formal actions, whatever that might be.
Yeah, thanks for that offer, Board Member Johnson. And the board staff has been really engaged in the Upper Yolo bypass comprehensive study effort and the master plan development. That's for the partnership, the Yolo Bypass Cash Flow Partnership. So that collaboration has been crucial for that project. And of course, the board was crucial in the Levels project. We are, as you know, under difficult budget times, and so working together to develop compelling BCPs is a real important part of our success and your success. So look forward to working together in that way. And let me think about it and we'll get back to you with more specific ideas. Yeah, thanks. Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Member Johnson. And I'm going to speak for the board that we really appreciate these ongoing updates of what's occurring. We do know our staff is very active, but if we as a board could provide some oomph in any way, we are very willing to do that. We know what's going on.
Yeah, thank you.
We are to partner with the Army Corps. Maybe we will assist them with their public outreach this time. But it doesn't always
Yeah.
occur.
Right.
So open mic. Okay, thank you. Anything else? Member Bosler?
I want to just thank you for being here. Thank you for the update on these projects. I definitely want to recognize how, our systems are still evolving, and I think DWR is really doing a lot to evolve in terms of being able to make the system these types of projects be easier, because they do require setting a much larger table and they're more complicated.
Right.
But they're also really impactful, and I just really appreciate all that you guys have done on the Levels project to really show people what the outcome is. And so I think, just very excited about all the work that's going on and how we can collaborate with all of the really good and amazing work and people that are out in the reclamation districts, like doing the hard work every day, and how we can connect all of the things you're learning on some of these bigger projects into other parts of our system.
Right. Absolutely. Yep. Helps us do better. Okay. Thank you.
For that, thank you. I don't see anyone standing up. Say something. Just a lot of nodding heads, Mr. Rogers, and ours as well. Thank you very much for that.
Okay. Thank you.
Okay, here's my thought. We're going to take this next item under board, the permit for the railroad. Then we'll take a break and have the SSJDD people get set up. Okay. No pushback on that. Good. Item 10A is consideration of action for permit 18197-1, Union Pacific Railroad. Mr. Umberto Negrete, our operations branch staff, will introduce and present this item. Good morning.
Good morning, President Dolan, members of the board. My name is Humberto Negrete, permitting engineer with the board, and I'm here to present the application submitted by Union Pacific Railroad for a bridge segment replacement here in the city of Sacramento. I'll be summarizing my staff report findings and recommendations to the board. A representative for Union Pacific Railroads are attendance on virtually, so they'll be available to answer any questions after the conclusion of my presentation.
How many of them are there?
We have two. We have Abby Corte and Mr. Steve Cheney.
Are they in Wichita? Is that where they can't be here?
Probably, yes.
Okay. Thank you.
No, just next one. Still see my presentation up. Okay, so the applicant for this, the applicant is Union Pacific Railroad. The location for this project is crosses the American River within the city of Sacramento. Specifically, Union Pacific Railroad proposes to remove segment A of bridge 92.12.
Mr. Negrete,
Yes.
just pause for just a minute until the slides catch up with your presentation.
Sorry, I didn't see
Okay,
it
we
coming.
got
There
to
it
see
goes.
you there for a while, both in person and on the screen. So there we are. Okay, thank you.
I'm sorry. Okay, here we go. The applicant is Union Pacific Railroad, and the request is to remove and replace an approximate 200-foot segment of an existing 3-segment railroad bridge that crosses the American River within the city of Sacramento. Specifically, Union Pacific Railroad proposes to remove segment A of bridge 92.1, which consists of a 13-span, 196-foot-long, dual-track stringer trestle railroad bridge, and replace it with a 7-span, 201-foot-long precast concrete box girder bridge with erosion control at the new abutment. The following slides will show an understanding of where the project is located. As previously mentioned, the project is located within the city of Sacramento, where the existing Union Pacific Rail line crosses the American River. It's located just downstream of the existing Business 80 bridge and near Cal Expo. The bridge segment being replaced is located at the southern left bank levee, shown there in the circle. It's 2 out of the 3 bridge segments, segment B and C, were replaced in 2007 under an emergency replacement permit under permit 18197 and are not part of this project. It's an aerial view of the crossing. The circle represents the bridge segment being replaced. It's the only remaining wooden feature of the original wooden structure that was built in 1949, and it needs to be updated. It shows the footprint of the project. Includes the bridge segment replacement and any staging areas, and access roads would be to the existing road shown here on the slide. Authority given to the board are from the following applicable California Water Code and California Code of Regulations Title 23 sections. This is an elevation view of the proposed structure with existing segment features shown, such as pier, pedestals, segment low chord elevation. And this view best shows the flood flow conveyance improvement due to the longer span lengths of the proposed structure, which shows that half of the bends in the floodway would be removed. This is a zoom view of the existing and proposed segment low chord elevations called out on the plans. The lower chord elevation of the proposed structure does not conform to a Title 23 standard and required a variance request to the board to approve a non-conforming encroachment. The overall analysis of the project resulted in staff's recommendation to the EO to waive the non-conforming standard in this case, which I'll talk about in the following sections. To summarize staff's findings, the board's jurisdiction includes the American River, a board-regulated stream as listed in Title 23, Section 112, Table 8.1. The board has an easement with the railroad along the levee. Additionally, the levee and the stream channel are parts of the Federal Civil Works project, so the project required a federal review and approval by the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers. The original wooden trestle bridge crossing was constructed in 1949 prior to the adoption of the state plan of flood control. The bridge crossing was authorized in 2007 by emergency replacement permit number 18197 due to a fire destroying most of the wooden bridge, which involved segments B and C. The segment being replaced, which is part of the structure that was not damaged in the fire, includes the south abutment located within the levee section. Sheet pile walls are proposed along the water side of the levee to allow for phase construction and will remain in place. Did I go too fast? The project components involve constructing the project in phases while keeping the rail lines open to traffic during construction. This is proposed to be done by using a pile driver to install the new supports DOH piles through openings cut on the existing bridge deck for the new pier bents. Each new bent consists of 6 DOH piles with a welded precast concrete bent camp. There will be no pile driving within the levee section. The abutment pile holes will be augured through the levee section, past the levee foundation, and then installed and driven if needed. The augured void will then be backfilled with concrete. This meets the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers criteria for work and backfill on the levee and does not impose bridge loads onto the levee, similar to the existing condition. When the new support piles are in place, railroad traffic will be close to the existing bridge deck can be removed and disposed off-site. The existing segments pier pedestals will be removed below ground line and backfilled per Title 23 standards. The new bridge segment spans will be pre-stressed concrete box girders constructed at a precast concrete facility and delivered to the site. The new spans will be placed on the new support pile bends using a crane, then the track components installed. Erosion control riprap is also proposed along the new bridge abutment. The LMA endorsement for this project is pending. However, the board has been notified that there are no objections to the project, and the general manager of the American River Flood Control District is ready to state to the board that approval will be recommended at an upcoming meeting. Please let me know if you'd like to hear from Mr. Tim Kerr if he's available. The replacement structure does not meet Title 23 standards, and a request to waive the standard was approved by the EO. A hydraulic analysis was performed on this segment of bridge that used a hydraulic model developed using an existing American River hydraulic study and a survey of the existing bridge as the parameters. The model analyzed the changes in water surface elevation of the project at the pre and post-project conditions at a 100-year flow of 157,000 cubic feet per second and a design flow of 180,000 cubic feet per second. The model analyzed the pre and post-project conditions to analyze any impacts on the flood system. Due to the joint federal project, the operation and maintenance design flow has been updated to 160,000 cubic feet per second. The range of flows analyzed includes this new design flow, so an updated analysis was not requested. No erosion control was needed at the piers due to the pier depth being below the scour of 4.7 feet. They are usually can be steep as 50 feet below ground or to pile driver refusal, which is well below the scour depth. So there's no riprap in the channel piers, proposed in the in-channel piers. The model results are shown in this table. The post-project conditions show no changes to the water surface elevation at the 157,000 cubic feet per second flow and a small decrease in the water surface elevation at the 180,000 cubic feet per second flow. By interpolating between the two proposed freeboards and considering the trapezoidal cross-section of the channel, the freeboard expected at the 160 cubic feet per second flow is more than 3 feet and removes the debris accumulation concern as it meets the freeboard criteria for new bridges. Even with the lower bridge chord elevation, better flood flow conveyance is expected with debris accumulation being a low concern. Additionally, Union Pacific Railroad submitted an emergency action plan for the site in the event of a high water event. The plan includes contact and stream monitoring information. Due to the non-conforming encroachment, Union Pacific Railroad submitted the variance request shown, stressing the efforts that would be needed to meet the standard. The lower court does not conform to Title 23, Section 128A, 16, The standard is intended to prevent a debris accumulation against the bridge structural members that would cause flood flow obstruction during high water events. The proposed structure's lower chord is due to having thicker girders to support the longer spans. The previous slide showed that even with the lower chord, the freeboard of the proposed segment would meet the freeboard standard of a new bridge. So debris accumulation concern is low. Therefore, staff recommended the EO waive the standard in this instance based mostly on the following reasons. There is no clearance requirement for railroad bridges due to the grade restraints. The replacement lower chord is not expected to accumulate debris and reduce flood flow conveyance, which is the intent of the standard. Meeting the standard would cause additional fill in the floodway, which will contribute to blockage. This design will maintain maximum channel capacity. A 200-foot segment of a 2,440-foot bridge is being replaced. Raising this segment would affect the other bridge segments. And the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers determined, and the board is in agreement, that the proposed project will not be injurious to the public interest and will not impair the usefulness of the proposed works. Section 11D of Title 23 gives authority to the EO to waive the standard if there's no legitimate reason to apply it. In this case, it was shown that the project as proposed will not be injurious to the public interest and will not impair the usefulness of the project works, and the waiver was approved by the EO. A geotechnical analysis was not required for the project due to no changes in the levee geometry, no pile driving in the levee section, and no bridge loads onto the levee. Board environmental staff determined that the project was exempt from CEQA and will not have a significant effect on the environment. Based on staff's analysis of the proposed project, it is recommended that the board take the following actions. Adopt the CEQA findings, approve the permit as provided in the staff report, and direct the EO to file the notice of exemption with the state clearinghouse. I can now take questions regarding the staff report findings. Thank you.
Mr. Negetre, do you want to ask if the railroad representatives that are online want to say anything at this point?
Sure. Is Abby Corte or Mr. Steve Cheney available for comment?
Going once? I'm guessing not. What do you think? Oh, do we have a hand up? Who is it?
Abby.
Abby Corte? Did I say that right?
I believe
Yes.
so.
You're on. Good morning.
Yes, good morning. This is Abby Cordy, and Steve Cheney is also on the line as well. I have no particular comments other than I really appreciate Umberto's work and support on reviewing the project and the board's consideration of approval of the permit. Thank you so much.
Thank you. That's just silence. Okay. Oh, do we have one more? Could you say that out loud since I can't?
Yes, Deirdre Desjardins with California Water
hello.
Research and Climate Action California. And I just want to bring up, I appreciate all the work you've done. I am concerned that we're continuing to use flood estimates based on a historic hydrology, and we're likely to see a step increase in extreme rates of precipitation. And as the North Pacific warms, it's happened all over the world, except in Western America and Siberia and the tip of South Africa. Every other place has seen a step increase in anomalous moisture transport by atmospheric rivers. And so I look at using the design flow of 160,000. I understand that's the best engineering estimate, but we've got to find a way as we do these upgrades of incorporating estimates of climate change amplified flood flows. Because if you look at the extreme flooding all over the world, last year, we're in the middle of climate change. It's here and it's going to hit sooner rather than later in California. Thank you.
Thank you for that. Noted. No one's not paying attention to that issue. Okay. Anyone else with the hand up? No. I'm leaning over our clerk's screen, but it's foggy. Did someone else?
Yes. ENG.
Oh, we got an ENG. Does that mean there's an engineer that wants to talk? Whoever you are who wants to talk online, you're on. Then please say who you are. We think you're ENG.
Hi, this is Steve Cheney with Union Pacific. Can you hear me?
Oh, yes. What was your name again, sir?
My name is Steve Cheney, Cheney. And I wanted to echo Abby Cordy's comments regarding Humberto's great presentation and representation of the project that we're proposing. I think he did a fantastic job of presenting the details there.
We agree.
And don't have any additional comments at this time. Thank you very much for the opportunity to consider this project.
Thank you, Steve.
Thank you for
Thank you.
the complimentation and saying that you agree.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Any other hands up? No? Anyone in the audience? Or board members? Member Countryman, I'd be quite surprised if you didn't say something.
I think it's a good project and the analysis was very good. So I'm ready to vote.
Yes, sir.
We like it when you say that. We know we're doing something appropriate, so thank you. So are we ready for a motion? As the staff has said, is to adopt the CEQA findings, noting all of the aspects of that are attached to that, and to approve the encroachment permit 18197-1 in substantially the form that we have, and direct the executive officer to take the required action to follow up. Is there a motion for that? Moved by member
I
Countryman.
so move.
I saw that. Second,
I'll second that.
member Bosler. One more chance to talk. Member
Yes,
Johnson?
thank you, President Dolan. I'm going to vote for this. It's a good analysis done under the rules that we have, and also note again that I agree that the state needs to be reviewing our design standards and providing good advice out to the community about how to think about these things going forward.
Thank you for emphasizing that. We ready to call the roll? Will you please call the roll for a vote?
Member Bosler,
Aye.
member Countryman,
Yes.
member Griego,
Yes.
Secretary Johnson,
Aye.
Vice President Belines is absent, President Dolan.
Yes. The motion has carried. The actions are adopted by unanimous vote of those present and able to vote. Thank you very much.
Thank you, everybody. Thank you.
I have a
Member Countryman?
post-vote comment. If that's
Well, okay, because it's you, I'm gonna allow it.
You know, the 1957 design profiles don't mean a damn thing. But yet
Could
they're
you say
being
that
used by
again?
people. You know, they were used in this case. The 180,000 CFS came from before Folsom Dam was built. Before Folsom Dam was built. It's still in there, still in the profile. People are still using it. Since that time, we've modified Folsom. We're widening the Sacramento weir, and the new design flows 160,000 CFS. Please, let us find a way to work with the Corps to revise the 1957 design profiles. They just no longer apply to the Sacramento area. And it's ridiculous to have them out there and people going and grabbing them and using them. I think we have them on our website.
We do because it's what exists, and you're right, sit here like pretending we have the right information. but
I'm more
it's
than
old.
willing to work with staff to meet with the Corps to find some way to get a design standard that makes sense and publish it. Thank you.
It would be good to put it into this century at least. Thank you. How about I ask that someone on staff craft that into an appropriate worded letter and transmit it to our friends at the Corps? Okay. All right. Okay, well, he wasn't writing that down until I pointed to it. Okay. Executive officer's gonna carry up on that. So we'll let you approve that letter. That would be great. That'd be great. I won't. Again, I won't ask for people who weren't with us in 1957 and we're still dealing with that. The world's changed. Okay, we're gonna take a 10-minute break and then we will reconvene to have the presentation and probably comments on the SSJDD feasibility study. 10 minutes. The board reconvenes. Someone called that the Dolan 10 minutes, but I would like to correct that to the board members 10 minutes. Because I was watching everybody have great conversations about whatever was of interest. So we're reconvening. We are at item 10B. That would be B as in brave. Sacramento San Joaquin Drainage District Assessment District Feasibility Study. Ms. Ruth Darling of our Flood Planning and Programs Branch will introduce and manage this presentation.
Yes. Thank you, President Dolan.
And it's still morning. So
Good morning, President Dolan, members of the board, Ruth Darling, Flood Board staff. Today, Kim Floyd and I will provide a briefing on the Sacramento San Joaquin Drainage District Assessment District Feasibility Study Draft Report of Findings. Board members received the draft and appendices on February 15th for review and comment. And I just want to note that prior to the board receiving the draft ROF, which I will refer to throughout the presentation, we circulated the admin draft amongst our flood control community for a 2-week review that began on January 16th. And Ms. Floyd will go over feedback from those groups later in the presentation. So just an overview of our presentation today. These are the topics that we'll be covering. So background on the SSJDD and the intent of the study, the overview of the draft ROF, our categories of service, the implementation plan, summary of findings, recommendations, and stakeholder feedback and next steps. So just to bring us back to the impetus of the study, reutilization of the SSJDD Assessment District was envisioned in the 2017 Central Valley Flood Protection Plan update. The 2017 update included an investment strategy that identified 3 new potential funding mechanisms, one of which was to reutilize the SSJDD Assessment District to resume assessment to fund capital and ongoing maintenance activities. The investment strategy concluded that revenue from the SSJDD assessments could provide up to $25 million annually for levee operations and maintenance and the local cost share of capital improvement projects. Based on this conclusion, the 2017 Central Valley Flood Protection Plan recommended evaluating the viability and effectiveness of reutilizing the SSJDD assessment district for these purposes. The potential funding source was carried forward in the 2022 Central Valley Flood Protection Plan update. However, it was recategorized as an additional local funding source and not state funding source. In response to the 2017 CVFPP recommendation, the Flood Board initiated the SSJDD Assessment District Feasibility Study in December of 2019. The purpose of the study was refined to address the following objectives that you see here on the slide. So evaluate the feasibility of the assessment district to provide funding for system-wide improvements and O&M of flood control structures and levees within the state plan of flood control. Identify any legislative changes required to implement an SSJDD assessment district. Perform a beneficiary analysis to establish a reasonable formula to apportion the assessment across benefiting properties. Provide recommendations for the formation and operation administration of an assessment district, and prepare an implementation plan. So a little bit of background on the SSJDD itself. The California legislature created the State Reclamation Board in 1911. The authority was transferred to the Flood Board in 2007 with the objective of cooperating with the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers to control flooding along the Sacramento and San Joaquin rivers and their tributaries. In 1913, the legislature created the Sacramento and San Joaquin Drainage District with the authority to acquire property and easements for flood control and to levy assessments to construct and maintain flood control facilities. The SSJDD authority is narrowly limited to levying assessments to support implementation of plans for reclamation and flood control contained in the California Debris Commission report approved on December 27th, 1911, and amended in January of 1925. So just to go over a few of the SSJDD existing legal authorities, the SSJDD can levy assessments. They need to be apportioned according to benefit. They need to be proportioned to the cost of the whole project. And they can levy assessments with a 2/3 landowner vote. That is a supermajority. So what's noteworthy here is the difference in approval thresholds of an SSJDD assessment and Proposition 218 assessments. Proposition 218 is the mechanism local agencies use to raise funding for O&M and the local cost share for projects. Under the existing SSJDD authority, 2/3 of landowner vote is required for approval of an assessment, unlike Prop 218, which requires a simple majority of a weighted vote. So the feasibility study requirements. The Flood Board, in coordination with the California Central Valley Flood Control Association, presented this topic of reutilizing the SSJDD assessment district at the Flood Control Association's annual meeting in 2019. Based on feedback we received during and following that meeting, we set forth with the following requirements for the feasibility study. We need buy-in from our local flood control community. We need to supplement, not compete with, existing state and local agency funding. Assessments need to be affordable for local landowners. There should be a sufficient return on investment. The methodology should be politically viable and legally possible. And the study should define a path for implementation. And with that, I'm going to turn it over to Ms. Floyd.
Okay.
Kim Floyd, good morning.
Good morning, President Dolan, members of the board. It's been a while since I've been before the board. It's a pleasure this morning. I want to start on the outreach and engagement by thanking our LMAs, the flood control agencies, and the Central Valley Flood Control Association, because their input and engagement was the key to defining the scope of the study and refining its elements. Going back to what Ruth said about stakeholder buy-in, we could not do this without their support. We focused on targeted outreach to the groups you see before you and emphasized small group meetings aligned with project milestones, such as identification of study areas, review of methodology, and review of draft findings. Now, keep in mind when we started, it was right when COVID hit. So our intent was to do more in person. We ended up doing a lot online. And again, I have to thank our partners in this process for sticking with us and keeping an open mind as we move through the study. To date, we've had more than 30 meetings with our stakeholders. Round one was really establishing the groundwork for the study. We determined that rather than taking a top-down approach and brainstorming among ourselves on services that could be funded, we wanted to work with stakeholders to identify services to be advanced through the study. We were clear that their consensus for services to be included in the study was not to be confused with consensus on services to be implemented through an assessment. This was a brainstorming process for feasibility purposes. It was also our opportunity to share early and address a concern that was, I think, a perception among a lot of stakeholders before we began, that the board could simply unilaterally impose an SSJDD assessment, that was within its authority, somewhat like a state maintenance area, instead of requiring a landowner vote. So we were able to talk about the existing legal authority and get that out of the way up front. Rounds 2 and 3 were focused on a review and refinement of the assessment methodologies for service categories 1 and 2. And then our most recent round of engagement several weeks ago provided stakeholders an opportunity to review an admin draft report of findings and give us comments. We did receive 4 sets of very thoughtful comments, and some of those were included in a revised draft that sits before you now for your review. In each round of engagement, our unspoken question to our stakeholders was, did we hear you correctly? And did we address your concerns? And that doesn't mean we always agreed with them, but did we address the concerns? So it was really during our first round of engagement that the study areas were determined, and together we identified 5 categories of services for the feasibility study process. I'll go over these each in detail, so I'm going to skip quickly through this slide. The technical team, which is not with me, by the way, today, so if you ask technical questions, I will make note and defer for follow-up. But the technical team developed and tested methodologies for 3 of the 5 categories and made revisions as appropriate based on not only stakeholder input, but board member input. Category 4 leveraged findings from Category 3, and Category 5 was unique in that it used the state's Property Assessed Clean Energy Program as a conceptual model. I'm going to walk you through a summary of the findings as they are organized in the report. And again, I do not intend to get into the technical weeds on any of these, but I do intend to hit on some high points and provide insight into several nuanced conclusions, because there are some. So our first category would focus on services that leverage beneficiaries beyond the boundary limits of individual LMAs. And for those of you who were on the board in 2019, you will remember that this was really something the board was interested in pursuing, because the idea that you could, for example, assess beneficiaries outside the boundary of an LMA that maintains a bypass levee and then be able to provide those resources back to the maintaining agency, which seemed like a good proposition. When we were working through this category, our stakeholders made it clear, and we've reflected that in the report, that this is not meant to be a replacement for 8361 funding. This would be for those facilities, bypass facilities, that are not covered under 8361. And it would specifically support supplemental O&M and capital project funding. The test cases we used for this were the Sutter bypass and then separately the Yolo bypass. And the methodology was based on benefit from avoided flood damages to land structures and contents. Now, the test cases resulted in a reasonable range of assessments on benefiting properties. However, it didn't perfectly track in rural areas because there are few structures in rural areas. So if this category were to be pursued, the methodology would have to reflect an adjustment for that fact. The bottom line determination for Category 1 is that technically it's feasible. Category 2 was for regional services that are performed by multiple LMAs within a river corridor. It's important to note on this category that although the concept was supported by stakeholders, we couldn't pin down a specific service to use as a test case. So the technical team estimated an annual revenue requirement and tested that in the Feather River Basin. It did result in small charges per parcel and thus was deemed technically feasible. However, more work would need to be done with LMAs to identify a specific service that would benefit from this category. Category 3, capital improvements and repairs for state maintenance areas. This really was an issue that came out of the Small Communities Flood Risk Reduction feasibility studies. and having to do with the difficulty in doing capital improvements in state maintenance areas. They're restricted in how they can collect funding and in fact aren't allowed to collect multiple year assessments that would be necessary to support bonding for capital projects. The test case we used was an overlay assessment in the town of Princeton using an avoided damages methodology. What we found was that the methodology is technically feasible. Avoided damages methodology is quite common, but the outcome is impractical. In other words, the limited assessment capacity of small communities results in an out of whack ratio between assessment administration costs and assessment revenues. The technical team determined that based on its criteria for feasibility, return on investment being one of them, this category should be deemed technically infeasible. But I'm putting a big asterisk next to that, and I'll explain the reason why later. Category 4, this would be for regional programmatic capital improvements for small community flood risk reduction projects. This would be visioned to take the place of a regional joint powers authority where none existed, or in cases where local agencies didn't want to form a regional entity. It's not an inexpensive process to do that. The technical team leveraged the results and the methodology from the previous category in determining that this was not feasible for the same reasons. But again, I'm placing a huge asterisk next to that I'll return to later. Oops. Last, we have something that's a little outside the box. We took a look at a non-structural mitigation program. And the gist here is that for non-structural improvements in all areas throughout the Central Valley, not just in small communities. The gist here is that the local agency would apply for a FEMA non-structural mitigation grant, which does require a local cost share, but that cost share would be passed on entirely to willing property owners in the form of financing. This was deemed technically feasible, but it would require separate and new authorizing legislation due to the financing elements. The implementation plan is not a plan to implement an SSJD assessment, but rather a path toward implementation. There remain some significant barriers, especially political. An SSJD assessment district cannot be successful, as I mentioned earlier, without support from local agencies, period. So we strongly recommend that this board continue to work with LMAs to refine the categories of service where there's interest, to ensure they're complementary and supportive of local needs and efforts. Once we have consensus on any of those areas, the board should pursue legislation in partnership with the Central Valley Flood Control Association to expand the purpose and intent of the SSJDD to align it with Proposition 218 landowner approval processes. But in the mix of that, the board has to take a hard look at the estimated level of effort and cost for administering an assessment program, which may include both staff and consultant time, and then determine how it would recover those costs. Before I go on, I really want to hit upon a piece of this, which has to be an upfront agreement on implementation guidelines. So you'll have the authorization language and legislation, but you need implementation guidelines, and those should be done concurrently. LMAs or local communities, in the absence of an LMA, should be required to petition the board to initiate the assessment process. The board would direct the preparation of a report similar to an engineer's report for a benefit assessment district, and then, upon review of the report, there would be an exit ramp for local communities or LMAs. They could withdraw their petition if they felt like it wasn't a good cost benefit. And if all parties agree to go forward, the board would be responsible for the entire legislative process, noticing, balloting, public hearing, and public outreach. So the concluding findings can be grouped into 5 areas. Some of this is going to be redundant, but it bears repeating for emphasis. We've covered the new legislative authorization that would be needed, but we need to make sure that it's expansive so that it covers priorities as outlined in the SSIA, not just of existing or facilities that were approved before 1923. The legislation should realign landowner approval requirements, again, so they're consistent with benefit assessments under California Prop 218. That's what property owners understand because that's what we work with for flood risk reduction projects in the Central Valley. Keep always in mind that this is not a new state source of funds. This is always going to be a local funding source. So all assessment revenues must be used within the benefit area. That has to be a part of the legislation. This can't be used to fund any CVFPB administration activities, except those directly related to the assessments. It's been made very clear in multiple meetings with stakeholders that if that were to be pursued, it would be opposed. The qualifying questions for any of this always is it most cost effective and efficient for the board to administer and collect this assessment? And would imposition of this assessment negatively impact a local agency's ability to levy assessments for local responsibilities? If the answer to both of those, first is yes and the second is no, it'd be wise to move forward. The methodology will need some refinement as we move forward, and it will differ depending on the scope of the service. Those tested in the study, those methodologies that we tested, were generally accepted in concept by stakeholders. Again, the highlight on this last bullet is really that the request to form an assessment must come from the local agency. That's non-negotiable. The locals know their communities and we should rely on them for that knowledge. So, recommendations on how we move forward. We think there's some interest and particular potential for advancing service category 1 for upper Yolo bypass. You had a presentation on that previous to this. This might be one means to fund some of those efforts. We'd also see a benefit in advancing service category 2, which is the funding of programs within a river corridor that are performed by multiple LMAs. I think we've exhausted the need for new legislative authorization. I won't kill you with that again. But the last one is that we believe the board should be interested in preparing a non-structural flood mitigation financing program feasibility study. Now that program may be better suited for a statewide program, but it might be interesting to be able to test that as a pilot program in the Central Valley. And I noted earlier that we met with stakeholders a couple weeks ago to review the admin draft report of findings and gave them a few weeks to provide comments. Again, the draft that you have before you does reflect some changes based on comments where appropriate. And I mentioned earlier in this presentation that in my remarks on service categories 3 and 4 that I would explain the asterisks next to our determination on feasibility. Again, we had deemed those categories technically infeasible because of the disproportionate ratio between admin costs and assessment revenues. However, stakeholders requested that those services not be excluded in any authorizing legislation because it may be the only option local communities have to raise funds, however nominal. So that change has been reflected in the report, although awkwardly. When we were reviewing it again yesterday, we noticed that the wording is awkward. We will refine that, but that was the intent. Stakeholders also reiterated their concerns in general: landowner affordability, potential conflict with local efforts to raise needed revenues, and making sure that we're exploring all alternatives to an SSJADD assessment before we engage in the complicated and potentially expensive process of new legislation to support that effort.
Thank you, Kim. Ruth, excuse me, Ruth Darling, the Central Valley Flood Protection Board. So this is our last slide, just next steps. The team respectfully requests that board members submit their comments by March 8th. And we will have a public draft ready for release for a 2-week public comment period on March 26th. This will be posted on our website and will be ADA compliant. And in May, we will have a final report of findings issued. And that is all. Thank you.
Which would be just a bit dependent upon the board members providing our written response.
If you need extra time, yes, just let us know.
Oh, well. Okay, wow.
Ruth, can you just remind me when this report's due?
What's that? Yeah, the contract expires at the end of the year.
So it's due to the legislature by the end of the year, is that the?
Well, we're
Question
anticipating
is,
to,
when is it due? The end of the year, and to whom is it
we
submitted?
would like to send it to the Department of Finance. I'm looking at our executive officer by June 1st, I think is when we're hoping to have, but go ahead.
This has been anxiously awaited by the administration and the legislature for quite a while now. I'll just leave it at that. There's no firm deadline, but it's kind of in the background of something that they would like to see.
Thank you.
Well, I will add to that. I don't feel the need to be as careful as you are. The thought process at one of the budget sessions, so that might have been the last time the budget had a shortfall, was, is there something else out there that can be utilized that does exist to provide revenue for needed flood improvement necessities? So it's like, whoa, here's this 1913, 1923 assessment district. Can we do that? Well, if it had been utilized continuously since then, instead of just left alone for a few decades, might have been more possible. But the whole financing legal framework in the last few decades has changed considerably. So it's become a bit more complicated than just saying, oh, we've got this existing assessment district, let's go
And the
forward.
governance structures too. You have regional JPAs now that didn't exist.
Exactly.
When the SSJDD was formulated originally. So I think that, that's one thing that we heard from stakeholders is, you'd have to prove that this were more cost effective than what they're doing at the regional level. And then also that it didn't conflict with their efforts to raise funds for their needs.
Right. And
Again,
yeah. No, thank you for pointing that out. And the conversations that needed to and still need to occur are paramount. Because the differences in anything that you can think of, let's start with population in 1923 to now, and then what we know and what we're facing with the changed climate and the volatility of California's budget. It's complicated. It's complicated. So it's not easy. It sounded easy. Hey, why not? And then it's like, well, let's see what can or cannot be done here. So it's good work. It's not like it's been sitting idle. The energy level has been immense, and things always stop that energy being continuous on a weekly basis. People have life, they have work, it floods, you got to go home. There's no money.
well, it was an iterative process too. So we didn't want to, as we walked through the various categories, we went back to stakeholders for gut checks.
Exactly.
And so, my hope is that, and I think that was reflected in the comments that we received, there were no surprises in this report. And we, I think, fairly captured their concerns and input.
I just read it once, and that was pretty fast, so it wasn't a good read for what you sent us, which is not a pound. I thought it would be 300 pages. Yeah, so it's there. But yes, and that's what the board wants, and that's what we know you did. Local input is keystone, and respecting that and constantly checking in is paramount. So yes, you do that very well. Thank you. The you being.
Well, I called in a lot of favors. I'm sure they're going to be coming back here.
Oh, we spread around our goodwill as much as possible, don't we?
Yeah.
And hope it comes back. All right. Okay. Member Bosler, you turn on your microphone, please.
Okay. Yeah, no, thank you for the presentation, and I'm going to spend some more time with it. I just want to comment a little bit on how it is such a big deal, and it's a really, challenging and legally complex world. However, The jurisdiction of the district is an interesting one, right? And one of the big challenges for us in the next, decades ahead with the changing climate and is really like updating our infrastructure to address that. And we've been going fairly slow, frankly, like historically. So I mean, I'm definitely not speaking in favor of this at all because I recognize 100% how big of a reform or change, or I don't want to even put a color on it. It's just a really big deal because we have these constitutional provisions around how locals can levy taxes, how the state can levy taxes, and this is sort of like in a different box. And so we would have to really like navigate all of that and would probably change like radically like a lot of other things as well to pursue it in a meaningful way. But I do think the jurisdiction is interesting, and I like that you've mentioned the JPAs because in absence of it's something like this, locals have figured out how to come together in really creative ways to do more faster in their regions and to pool resources to be more effective. Not everywhere. There's still a lot of work in progress in that area. But we do need to encourage more of that because I think the way in which we get to accelerate our progress and in making the improvements we need in our regions is through that kind of collaboration, which is sometimes really hard because all politics are local. And I've got people here on this board that are way more steeped in local government politics. But yeah, no, this is a big issue. These things get me excited because it's interesting to think about big structural changes and how they might actually improve things. But I mean, I'm not there yet on this at all. And I think that it would be very, very complex given my history in tax policy and financing and probably ultimately would need to be, I mean, it's interesting that statute we have as a statutory authority, but it feels like there's so many interactions with the Constitution. I would think politically, ultimately, it would probably need to be some sort of constitutional amendment, but I don't know legally.
Yeah.
It needs something.
If I can just make a comment that may get me kicked out. Sorry. But I think, having been here from the beginning of these discussions, 2017, 2018, 2019, I think this was visioned as kind of a silver bullet. Here we have a source of $25 million and we can, just impose an assessment and that's the complexity of it. But more so what it would mean for local agencies. And again, one of the comments that came through loudly and clearly was that please look at regional partnerships, what's being done locally before you go any further down this path.
Oh, we will. Thank you. So go away. Member Grego.
Thank you. I appreciate this discussion and the information that's provided in this report, and also from my fellow board member over here in regards to local government, because Jane and I have a lot of experience when it comes to local government and how assessments are done. And my experience with Three Rivers, and that was creative as well. But for me, looking, and I had this discussion just recently about climate change and the effects it's having on the community, whether it's floods or fires. But, at local government level, they assess fees for development fees and impacts. And when you go through that process, you have to have an engineering study about, when you want to bring into a new fee into the structure. And I haven't had this discussion with Yuba County, but I'm going to through the liaison meeting that I do monthly, is that how are you applying any, climate change or flood control elements in your fee structure? And have you considered looking at that specifically? Because I think that, when a new business comes in and has a huge impact in the community and requires the labor that it's gonna need in order to, to provide this business, everybody has to pay in. Whether you're a developer or whether you're a commercial developer or whatever, everybody, otherwise this doesn't happen. This flood protection is just gonna be, pie in the sky. I love those food analogies. And so, I think that we have to have that discussion with local government and see if they're taking those things in consideration. Maybe you know anything, something
Well,
about
I
that.
know that in the areas that are covered by AFCAs, that's definitely happening. And that's always been part of the financing plan for state and federal levy improvements, local improvements. Something that's being done a little bit differently down in Sejafka's area for Mossdale Tract is they developed an enhanced infrastructure financing district, which means an increment of the taxes, the new property taxes in the areas covered by the project go toward payment for the project, in addition to a development impact fee, in addition to city and developer advancements, and in addition to assessments. So it's creatively piecing those together. And again, you would have to look at those in relationship to the value that an SSJDD would bring. But again, I don't want to discourage it because there is some interest for the YOLO bypass, for example, in taking a look at that. I think where there's not a flood control agency, and they don't want to create one, or they can't because of cost or just capacity, this perhaps could be a good alternative. And then I really think that the non-structural mitigation category service 5 is interesting and should be explored because we have it for, we have the PACE program, why not? So I think there would be willing property owners who would vote to finance that over the long term.
And I'm sort of familiar with that PACE program, but that was where the county actually finances it. Is that correct? Is that the same program or is
That's
it
the
different?
state.
Okay, this is the
And
state
I don't
program.
know the ins and outs of the PACE program in particular, but
It's a-
it would be state, but it requires, I mean, there's different elements there. It requires, because of the financing element where you are basically lending money to a property owner, it has to be, it'd be a completely different legislative authority.
Yeah, the PACE program is in the context of energy efficiency. And so it's a debt instrument that because of the state's involvement in it, people can actually get and sit secondary to your mortgage, right? Like, because most people have mortgages, and so getting a separate like debt instrument on top of a mortgage, because it's always going to be secondary, is challenging, right? So this is a way in which you can make those improvements to your home. Yeah. So.
Yeah. So there's
Local effort, state financing, and cannot neglect referendums and.
So in some, it's not the silver bullet, but we shouldn't totally discount it because I think there is interest in some areas, and we should continue working with the LMAs and the Flood Control Association to see if it's worth pursuing.
Multiple pursuit. Member Johnson?
Thank you, and thank you for the presentation. And I'll have a couple comments, but I'll start with where you finished, which is I support that approach. We don't have to make judgments about ultimate practicality in particular instances to be able to advance the analysis and go stepwise toward an understanding for people of where something might make sense or not. And you can certainly imagine, I've gone back and forth on how optimistic or hopeful to be that it helps, but you can certainly imagine cases where it might, because we know that existing boundaries don't always match what's needed on the ground. And that's why we have the regional entities. We don't know always that the locals who want to do another permanent regional entity. So conceptually, you can at least circumstances where it would make sense. And I think that the analysis done so far proves that out. I also at least very tentatively, am tracking the overall recommendations for next steps. And would say in a preliminary way, at least, that also makes sense to me. Certainly advancing it through this process over the next few months. Seems like a good plan. I will have comments that I send on the document. The one that I would make now, just to get it out there, is related to your asterisks. I noticed reading through both the summary and also the back, the same thing that you mentioned, that you all, were thinking about yesterday coming in. I think there's a difference between technically infeasible and likely to be impractical. Like those are not the same thing. And category 4 in the summary, and this isn't to, throw stones at the drafting, but the text of it says, although impractical, it remains technically feasible.
Yeah, that's
But
when
the-
I
and the-
said
and the- and the
earlier,
header says
awkward
technically
phrasing.
infeasible. And I would just distinguish between those two things, and because they're not the same thing. And the practical sense is something that could change over time and change as you have different actual examples and use cases. The practical sense was built on the test case, which isn't the whole set of possible test cases in the future, right? So those are different things. And I would just, I would focus on being clear about that, and would agree in not excluding things that are technically feasible as you're advancing discussion, because we're guessing that it might end up being impractical. We can decide not to do it later this year, or even after the legislation passed, if it ever got that far on the practical sense. That's the whole point, is to advance things to be able to make that determination case by case.
Yeah. And again, I think, the reason that was, and I hear what you're saying, and we've had this discussion as well as we were reviewing comments and talking about the report, but we had those criteria for feasibility. And one of them was, just for this study, was return on investment. That did not have the ROI. Again, you had high admin costs, low revenues. And so could that be make it technically infeasible alone? Yes. Now, when you talk about, was the methodology technically sound? Yes. And I guess that's where the difference is. The methodology was sound, the outcome was not feasible. So I think, we need to figure out how to massage that. Now, given the input that we've had from stakeholders who have said, again, don't exclude that, because it might change, or that might be the only thing we have. And maybe we don't need to raise a large sum of money. Maybe we just need a cost share for a grant, for example. Then, okay, fair enough. So we'll take your comments and right. But in terms of the test cases, and we use those to test that category, that was the outcome. Now, we'll find a way to smooth that language so that we make that distinction clear.
We board members are charged with looking at this and providing comments. Because if we don't.
Oh, yes, please.
It
It
won't
makes
be
a
helpful.
difference. It does make a difference. In fact, board member Countryman's review of the methodology on one of the service, on category 1, I believe it was, really helped us refine that scope. So that was good.
If
Comments,
you don't
Matt?
hear from member Countryman, you call him.
Thank you so much for your time and listening. Thank you.
Thank you. I guess same with all of us. Yeah, I wondered how you would do that, but very well done. Thank you.
Okay, thank
Ms.
you.
Darling. Oh, that was your conclusion, thanking us. No, this is important. I'm glad that we scheduled this, and we will do it more in between everything else we're needing to do. Mr. Engler, did I get that right this time?
You did, thank you. President Dolan, members of the board, thank you for the quick comment today. I just wanted to commend staff and the technical team, Ms. Floyd, they really did reach out. You hear a lot of people say that we did go out for public outreach and we held a public meeting, blah, blah, blah. But no, they really reached out when we made comments. They followed up. They came up with ideas. They bounced those off of us. And so all the way through this process, they've involved us, and we really, really do appreciate that. While we're finding that this is probably only going to be feasible in limited occasions, we think there is promise that there are going to be times where we need to really find a way to fund these things. The one thing we do want to make sure we continue to encourage you on is before we move forward anywhere, we reach out to the locals, because they're the ones that are going to make or break this every time. So I know that the team's been proactive all the way along, but hopefully they're still around when this eventually becomes viable, and hopefully we're all still around and we can make this happen. But if not, we just want to make sure that you include in the record that the locals really have to be involved when this comes around. So with that, thank you again, and have a nice weekend.
Thank you for that. I was counting the times that someone said or was in the report that local interests need to be involved and consulted and agree. So I stopped at a dozen. So let's just say that is absolutely a goal and a requirement from this board. And I also need to say to you and to everyone else who has suggested that, if you don't know that that's our priority, you haven't been paying attention. So there. Is that I have a comment, Member Boslett? Okay, that's good. We like it when you think. Thank you for your comments, Member Johnson. That got me thinking too. And my colleague, Mary Jane, and I we'll look at this. Make sure you talk to the locals, or they'll. Okay. Did you say there was someone hand up online? Deidre Desjardins? Ms. Desjardins? You have a
Yeah,
comment?
thank you. I really appreciate the work on this, and I think it's going to be incredibly important as we face increased frequency of flows. I did want to say that we're not only seeing increased very wet years, we're seeing an increased frequency of very dry years. And the shift in the 21st century, maybe there's new evidence that it may be partly forced. We're not just having droughts. We may be in a multi-decade long dry period. And I'd like to be able to get some information, because the way the water board is currently, the last drought, they curtailed senior water rights, and there was a voluntary curtailment of diversions on the Delta by 25%. And it's going to significantly impact the ability of the reclamation districts to raise money for this kind of assessment. And I would hope that would be the sort of forward-looking assessment, economic assessment that we need to start doing. Thank you.
Thank you for that comment. Is there anyone else that has indicated it online? We don't see that. Nobody's quite yawning yet, so there we are. Okay, so we'll move on. Thank you. Thank you. All of you. Yeah, that's an amazing effort. And I compliment you on a PowerPoint that distills the complexities of this to factors that we can think about. Thanks very much. All right, item number 11 are reports from our various staff and entities. Board's administration came in the evening. Want to make sure it's timely. Operations branch, flood system improvement branch, environmental land management, floodplain and programs. And I'm going to note that Member Countryman, as he does from time to time, but he did a number of questions and they were excellently answered by staff. So at some point, those kinds of questions are going to be incorporated into workshops that we're doing on plan implementation, so. We received them. We don't ignore you. We appreciate you. Okay. Board comments, committee updates? Anybody been anywhere they want to share? Okay, not. There we are. We have some upcoming meetings. I will say this now, the possibility of a board workshop on March 8th is still to be determined. So stay tuned. Keep it on your calendar, but there's just conversations going on if there's actually viability for that. Coordinating committee, March 19th, and it's set to be a pretty informative, interesting meeting. Next business board meeting, March 22nd, right here. Then a workshop, April, in this location as well, April 26th. And then I guess after that, we don't have any more meetings, but we'll talk about it. No closed session, correct, Mr. Dew? At some point, one of these things is going to be done, but not yet. So no closed session reports. I just want to say at this point, I want to adjourn the meeting in this manner. In the year 2023, and I do not remember the month and failed to look it up, our flood community and local community in Northern California lost Maureen Ladybug Doherty. Yes. And she served on this board. We were surprised to find that her name was Maureen because she only went by Ladybug. She was a amazingly feisty, knowledgeable, I will let you know how things need to be in Northern California woman. So that's sad. And then also last month, former board member when it was Reclamation Board and former local entity, very knowledgeable, very known, Bert Bundy, passed away. So those were sad occurrences. Those are the ones that served as board members, and I just wanted to say that their loss is felt and noticed, but their legacy goes on. So I will adjourn this meeting in their memory.